Today's guest is usually our co host, but today he is the one being interviewed. We have Doug here.
He's going to be talking about some chapters in his life as a child and PTSD and how it has affected him now and how he can help other people.
Hello. Today we have a different co host than usual with us. So, welcome, Carly.
Thank you.
Divorced when I was 2 or 3.
After they divorced, what followed with that?
So my mom rented a trailer in Mountain Green at a place called The Wheel, and hardly nobody knows where that is anymore. We lived in that trailer until I was 4, and then when I was 4, we moved to Clearfield. My mom bought a house in Roy for $14,900, and she didn't know how she was going to make that $125 a month payment with 3 kids, being a single mom, going to school, working full time. We lived there for quite a while.
Hey, where was your dad at?
My dad stayed in Morgan. He was a construction worker and an artist. He remarried soon after, and this is where my first chapter really starts. My first memory was when I was 3 or 4. I think it was right around when we left the wheel and was moving to Clearfield. And that's when my stepbrother started sexually abusing me.
Did you grow up primarily with your dad and stepmom?
No,
Or-
I grew up with my mom, and I always wanted to see my dad's on the weekend. And just so you know, my dad is a great man, but he was also an alcoholic. And so a lot of times he would say, okay, I'm coming to get you. I'm coming to get you. And then he wouldn't show up. And so I wasn't really close to my dad. I mean, we went there after the abuse started. I couldn't tell anyone because I was told that, my abuser would kill me, that he would kill my family and he'd kill my dog and my teachers and, all of this stuff. If I ever told, the abuse just kept happening and happening. And so although I missed my dad when he didn't come, I was sort of relieved that he didn't come because I knew the abuse would happen.
How long did that continue for?
So until I was 7, it continued. And then when I would go to my dad's, I would stay with my grandma. And my grandma lived across from the grocery store. And that house, after she died, my dad ended up buying that house. The stepbrother was long gone by then. And I'll explain that in a minute. But so I started staying with my grandma, and then my dad would come and take me to lunch or whatever. And so I really had not a really close relationship with my dad. Later on, I'll tell you how I got back to be in touch with him.
How old was your stepbrother or your abuser? How much older than you?
He was 7 years older.
Okay.
And so it started when he was probably 11 or 12. My life was shit because of it. And I didn't realize it at the time what effect it would have on my life, on the people that I loved's life and everything else. Where it happened is if you were in that small town and you know where the post office is right behind that. My dad rented some property and he had a sheep camp there, and that's where it would always happen. And so throughout my life, it was almost impossible for me to be around hay because there was a lot of hay in there, or walk on grass without shoes. I couldn't stand the feel of it. And there's a river right there. And I would always go out of my body sort of when this stuff was happening. And I could always hear that river. And although the river was calming, it caused so many problems in my feelings that for many, 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 many years, I could not do any of those 3 things. Go on a hayride without a blanket over it, or walk on grass when everybody's like, take off your shoes and let's go running. I'd always keep my shoes on. If I went fishing, it would always be at a lake because I didn't want to hear the sound of the rivers, but I got help through therapy. Anyway, so it was very, very tough. And I was very, very shy because of it.
That's a hard thing to navigate at any age, but being such a young child and that being one of your first memories,
It was my very first.
Like, that's such a horrible thing, and especially where you were told and threatened that if you did speak up or say anything, that these horrible things would happen as a little kid. You have no sense of anything else other than that's what you're being told, so that must be what happens.
With me and my 2 girls, my 7-year-old and my 2-year-old, I'm very, I would say, maybe like overly cautious about talking about these types of things with them and what appropriate touch is. And we have books on body boundaries and other things like that. And some people might say I overdo it. But did anyone ever talk to you about that from a young age, or was it not even a thought in your mind?
No one ever talked about it in the 60s.
Okay.
I was born in 65, so this started happening in 1969. I started kindergarten in 1970. There was none of that. There was nothing of that. And I loved my teachers and I didn't want them to die. And that's what I was told was going to happen if I told anyone, and, if you ever tell the police, they're not going to believe you, stuff like that from my abuser. It just kept happening. And this is why I speak up so much about it now. The reason I'm doing this and the reason I'm speaking out about it is because a lot of people die because of this, because they can't handle what happened to them. Our goal on this podcast, and I'm not co-hosting today, but it is to save people's lives and to keep them alive. And if this helps one person, then this is worth talking about.
I do think it's such an important thing. Like Carly said, that I mean, I wouldn't even call it overprotective. I don't think you can go too far on, anything that helps a child or anyone for that matter. It's a horrible conversation, and it's horrible that you even have to have that with a child. But I'm glad that, we are aware of those things that weren't talked about then.
In another podcast that we did, which is our best viewed podcast, is about two sisters that kept family secrets forever about abuse, sexual abuse. And Michelle, during it, says that she was so overprotective for her children, they never had sleepovers and always had to have the door rooms open and different things like that. And I think that's amazing. To keep kids away from abuse is what should be expected of parents now.
I listened to that episode, and I think she mentioned something about how her kids, are they adults now or
They are.
Okay. I think she mentioned that like they thanked her for doing that because now they don't have to work through childhood trauma. I have about the same rules with my girls at my house too. And right now my 7-year-old likes to say like, what? We can't have sleepovers. That's not fair. I hope one day she'll have those same thoughts, that Michelle's kids have of thanks for protecting me. Cause I feel like it is kind of hard. I had sleepovers growing up, and I'm really lucky that nothing happened to me. I don't know. I just feel like if kids can it's hard for kids to understand that, obviously, but I think it's so important.
After all of this, and like as you continue to grow up, I know a lot of people blame themselves in these situations. Was that something you also struggled with? Did you feel like it was your fault?
I always thought that everyone knew. I would walk down the street and think that everyone saw me and that they knew. And we were very, very poor. I always say that we were the poorest family in the trailer park. I mean, this is how poor we were at the beginning. But I would always think that people knew, but they didn't talk about it. They didn't. As I got older, about 20, but we'll go back and talk about before that. But when I was about 20 and I started going to counseling, I saw people in counseling. I went to a group counseling. I saw about half the people in there blame everything that ever happened in their life on abuse. Because I was abused, I started drinking. Because I was abused, I started smoking. Because I was abused, I started doing drugs and everything else. And then the other half is like, oh my gosh, I volunteer at the homeless shelter. I, do all these amazing things for other people and stuff. And I decided then that I wanted to be the second part, not the first part. And so that's why most people see me as being the happy, joyful person that I am on the outside. Sometimes those happy, joyful people are not the ones that are really happy on the inside. We try to make people happy. Sometimes we fail, and a lot of times I fail. I would rather never blame what happened to me as a child, live my life in such a crazy state that I never get over it. And it took me, you'll learn here, but it took me forever to get over it. And I'm still on medication because of it and go to counseling every week.
So did you say that at the age of 7 is when it stopped with the stepbrother?
Yeah, because I think I got smart enough. And I know this is crazy because I was ahead of my time, I think. I got smart enough that I would stay at my grandma's, and my sister did too. I did because I felt safe there. And my grandma was an amazing, amazing woman. And in fact, I have a book coming out, and she's I named one of the characters after her. So my grandma Irene rocked. But anyway, my dad would come over and take us to lunch or take us to dinner and take us for rides and would go fishing and different things like that. But I knew I was safe there because I was always either with my grandma or with my dad. There was never, hey, let's go out back. And I'm like, it was pretty crazy. And then my mom met my stepdad when I was 7, and they got married when I was 8. And then when I was 9, we moved to Spain for 4 years. And I thought, okay, it's over. No more abuse. Life's good. Nobody knows me. But I still thought that everybody could see was abuse. And at that time, I really needed counseling, but nobody knew what counseling was back then. I mean, unless you're, had bipolar or something, there was no counselors to go see. You would never think to tell a school counselor or anything like that. Now school counselors save lives every day. And back then there was nothing. So I'm fine. And we loved Spain, and we lived in Zaragoza for 2 years. My dad was in the military, my stepdad, great man and great time. And then we moved to Madrid. There, I was in scouts through the LDS church, and we went on a scout camp, and there were 3 boys and 1 leader, which should have never happened. When we were there on the second day, he took us all to the river or to the lake. We got in, and he had a bar of soap, and he went to each of us and said, I need to teach you how to wash yourselves. And he put his hands down our pants and rubbed where he shouldn't have. I, once again, thought, they're going to kill my mom and dad and everything. So I never told. This person was a leader in my church. The Boy Scouts should have had 2 adults there at all times. It happened to all 3 of us boys. So I never knew those boys after because, military people move and everything. But during counseling, I said, well, maybe he was just trying to teach us something. My counselor was like, what are you talking about? So anyway, that was the end of my abuse, but it life-changing too.
Do you think that by you saying, like, maybe he was trying to teach us something, do you think that was your way of, like, justifying or, like, trying to make sense of it in your mind of what happened?
At the time. Oh, I definitely know it was wrong.
Yeah.
But if I was born now, I would have done something about it.
And you probably didn't want to believe that it had happened to you again, maybe. Like, there's no way this is happening again.
There's no way. There's no way.
No.
Anyway, so it started affecting my life. And I think at that time, I was almost ready to come back to the States. I'm trying to think. So I was 9, 10, 11, probably 12 when it happened, right? When I became a Boy Scout. And when I was 13, we moved to Mississippi, and my dad was transferred, and we spent 2 years there. And so I was in junior high there, and I definitely was depressed, like definitely. And they always thought I was so smart there because at the time, Mississippi was like 49th in education. There's, I was the top of my math class, top of my English class, top of it, everything. And I thought, man, I'm really smart. We moved back to Utah.
When you moved to Mississippi, kind of like when you said you moved to Spain, that it was a fresh start almost. Did you feel that way about Mississippi, or was it like, what if something happens again? What if there's another person here?
I knew by that time that I was smart enough that nobody was going to kill me if they abused me, and that if somehow I couldn't fight it off or anything, that I would. So somewhere in that junior high era, we probably had some classes on safety, or I just remember being so depressed, and I would stay in my house. My friends would want to go out and play, and I would read a book or watch a baseball game or something. It was pretty hard, but my brother wasn't there. My brother stayed with my dad when we went to Spain.
Did you know when you were feeling that way, that depression, did you know at that time that that's what it was? Or did you feel...
No.
Okay.
I just felt like I was different than everyone else.
Right. That's exactly my experience. That's why I had to ask.
I just felt like I was different. And, I was pretty shy, and people don't believe that because I'm, at work, everybody's like, shh, I joke a minute and everything else. And I would hardly talk to anybody. It's almost like McKenna's personality. She's very quiet until you get to know her. And that's how I was with everyone, because you don't know who to trust. In my church, if you go in and talk to your bishop, at the time when I was Mormon, I wouldn't have ever told him that I was being abused. The thing is if I would have, I don't know at that time what they would have done to that leader.
I was going to say, what? Yeah.
He was in the military, probably would have, been demoted or went to jail or anything else. And if it was me in this time, good for him that he's going to jail. Good for him he's going to prison.
Something that we did talk about in Carly's episode, I believe, was in school and growing up as a kid, a lot of times it's like, okay, you're sad. Like, it's hard to be a teenager, or, there's a lot of things that you can almost blame it on, but you knew that this was different, even though...
Right. When I was being abused, when we moved to Roy, we lived in a cul-de-sac. Every time I was abused, I'm sorry, I would pretend like I'm flying around that cul-de-sac. And because there was so much pain and so much craziness there. Took myself out of that's what I did. And then as I got older and was in junior high and then in high school, I took myself out of situations. If there was a tough situation, I would walk away. And you'll learn that that's what I did most of my life. I had to avoid the bad things in life. Those bad things were situations that I couldn't handle. And it could be something simple. It could be eating a certain candy that my abuser would buy for me. And then I would start eating it and he'd say, okay, now you have to pay me back, or something like that. And so I was in All a Dollar today and I was going to buy some treats and I saw some lemon heads and emotions just came up to me. And we're talking 55 years later. It never goes away. Although I'm in counseling and we've been working on my PTSD since day one of counseling with this counselor, and easier. And I mean, it gets easier because I learn how to not walk away and learn to deal with it.
I don't know if you want to talk about this now or later, but I do think it is important just to talk about the fact that PTSD comes in many different forms. Obviously, when we think of PTSD, you think of someone who, was in war, had that kind of situation, but PTSD can be caused from so many things. And I feel like it is more talked about now, but I also think it's so important to just touch on that. And
My stepfather was a hero in the Vietnam War. And he came back and he had a lot of PTSD and he never took it out on us. But some of the things that he went through, he should have went to counseling for, and he didn't. But one time I took a picture of him and a flash went off because he was asleep and it was a funny position. And we were at his mom's house and my grandma's. And he jumped up and had his hand around my neck in like 2 seconds. And then he realized what he was doing. He said, don't ever, ever, ever put a flash on me again. My gosh, and he explained what PTSD was. And I always assumed that it was war when I went to counseling. I've been to many counselors, by the way. And when I went to this counselor and she was doing the intake, she just said, I think most of these problems in your life were probably from PTSD, from what happened as a child. And as we work through these, I think your life's going to change. And I've been going to her for about 1.5 years, and my life has completely changed for the better. And sadly, my son Riley and your brother killed himself, and he didn't get to see me as always happy instead of maybe grumpy, or I don't know. I just think he could have saw a better me, and he never got that opportunity.
I think the you he saw, though, was amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you and like the growth that you've made. I don't want you to ever feel bad on.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it breaks my heart to hear you say that too, because I mean, you have been through so much, and I don't know if Riley knew.
Yeah, Riley knew.
He did.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, I think it's hard because that guilt you feel, I don't want you to feel that guilt,
Yeah.
but it's
As a
just
parent,
hard
we
to
always have
navigate.
guilt.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember feeling bad because I wasn't coaching a football team or something. And I was already coaching a soccer team and a basketball team and a baseball team and umpiring and teaching Sunday school and teaching primary and being a scout leader and, a Cub Scout leader. And I did all of that while working full time and running a newspaper. And I don't know how I did it. I really don't. We had 5 kids and I still spent plenty of time with every kid. And you may hear different from someone else, but I think I spent plenty of time with all of them, and they've all thanked me for how much time I spent with them.
Right. I'm sure they all recognize and see how much you did and love that about you, because I had a funny little, I know this is your episode, but
No.
I have a funny little sidetrack. Lately in the last, I don't know, 6 months, I've been feeling a lot of guilt for working, and I only work 3 days a week, but I just feel like I'm missing out on a few of the good things that I could be around for. But I tried to explain to my daughter that, this is how I help out and provide a little bit. And in this time right now, this is what we need. But she mentioned to me that she had a nightmare and she was like overboard on a boat, and her dad came over to help her. And I said, I don't know why I said this, but I said, where was I? Like in the dream, you know? And she said, you were at work. And that devastated me. And it kind of made me want to rethink how I'm doing a few things. But then last night we were in the car coming home and we were passing a little drawing board back and forth and just writing notes to each other. And I think the first thing I said was, Quincy is clever, like just a cute little, and I passed it back. And then she wrote something back to me and passed it up front, and it said, Mom works hard. Thanks. And so I think kids notice, even though it might feel like they don't.
And you do a lot for your kids. So I think one of the big things in life is we always feel guilty that we could have done better. No matter what it is. I could have done better at my job. I could have done better with my relationships. I could have done better, but we try the best we can, and we do the best with what we had at the time. And I love that saying, and it's very famous, but we try.
I had a really long talk with my oldest brother, your oldest son.
Yeah.
Just a couple days ago, and we were just talking about when we were kids and stuff. We have such a big age difference that we really never lived together, or like we didn't experience the same childhood. We talked about you a little bit, and I just said, I don't have one bad memory of you. Like everything, it's gonna make me cry. All of the time that I spent with you was amazing. Like I really don't have one complaint from going to work with you when I was too little to be in school, and just every time I spent with you after was amazing, and it still is.
You're my assistant editor at the newspaper.
You're probably the only person I could do something like this with.
Yeah, I think it broke my heart the day that I was walking you to school and you said, Dad, can you not hold my hand anymore? Because my friends will see it. And I was heartbroken.
That would
hurt.
And every parent has that time in their life when that happens. And the kids are like, will you not drop me off in front of the school or something like that, So thank you, McKenna. That means a lot. And Jeremy now works at the same company I used to work for, which is Kimberly-Clark. And he works the same shifts I used to work, where we switch every 3 days from nights to days to nights to days. And he has one stepchild, and he says, it's almost impossible for me to do it. And you were doing it with 5. And he said, and you were coaching my soccer team, and you were coaching my baseball team, and you were coaching my basketball team. And
do you want to go back a little bit from where did you go after Mississippi?
Okay, so when we went to Spain, my mom and stepdad decided that they would keep the house in Roy and rent it out. And so we kept that house. And so when my dad retired from the military, we moved back to that house. And it was a week before my 10th grade year. And so I went to high school in Roy, where my grandson's going now, which is pretty funny. My years at Roy were pretty good because I was a very good bowler. I worked at bowling alleys, and I was a really good bowler, or at least I thought I was really good at the time. And I got my pro bowler's card, and I went out for a week and a half or 2 weeks and knew that I was not as good as I thought I was. In Utah, I was really good, but I wasn't good on the national level. And so I came home, and my parents said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to college. Well, like I said earlier, in Mississippi, I was the top in English, top in math, top in history, top in everything. And then I went to Roy, and I struggled in my 10th grade English class. English teacher said that I needed to go talk to the counselor. And so I went to talk to the counselor, and they did some testing, and they found out that I had dyslexia. It was to the point where this 10th grade English teacher said, you probably can still take English, but you probably should be in resource reading for English. And I was devastated because I'm like, I'm not normal. And here it is, people seeing me again. And so when people walk down the hall and they look in that resource reading class and they see me, they're going to think that I'm dumb, And I hate to say that word because special ed kids are so special, and my wife's a special ed teacher. So I decided on that very first day that I went into that class that I was going to tell everyone that I was the teacher's aide. And so for 3 years, I was the teacher's aide. So in 10th grade, I passed English. I mean, I think I got a C. And then I got to 11th grade, and I walked into what everyone said was the meanest teacher ever. Well, I have a Christmas book coming out. Part of my acknowledgments is a thank you to her because she believed in me. And her name is Eleanor Olson, and she's in a memory care center now. but she was the most amazing teacher. And she not only taught us English, but she taught us to love ourselves. Later on, she would end up teaching my current wife in college at Weber State University. I passed her 11th grade class, but I was tardy a lot. She struggled with it. And so when we were signing up for 12th grade classes, she said, I went to her and she said, the only opening I have is first period. And I know you're not going to make it. So I don't want you in my class because you're not going to be there. And I said, I promise you that I'll be at your class every day. I promise you. And I walked mile and a quarter every day, and I got there. And so I struggled in her class. English, you think, okay, what am I going to do? And it was a day of a track meet, and I had my track uniform on because we were going to leave like at 11 or 12 to go to this track meet. And she walked up to me and she handed me a piece of paper and she said, you need to fill out this essay before the end of class, or I'm not letting you get on that bus because you're failing my class. And I love this woman, but I hated her at the moment. And so I wrote the essay, and it was called What America Means to Me. And this is someone that lived in another country and knew how much freedoms we really did have in America. So I wrote it down in my sloppy handwriting. To this day, I'm the world's worst writer. And I turned it in, and I thought that was the end of the story. I got on the bus, and I had a great time at the track meet. I completely failed at what I was doing at track. Every year I got, better and better, but I was never that great, but it was fun. And 2 weeks later, in walks the principal of Roy High with the school superintendent, and his name, we were school superintendent, his name's Jay Taggart. And Mr. Taggart and him were there, and Miss Olson calls me up to the front of the room. And I'm like, I am in some big trouble, and I don't know what I did, because I was pretty quiet. My girlfriend was at Clearfield, so it's not like I got in any trouble at Roy. And Miss Olson said there was an essay contest for the school district called What America Means to Me. And Mr. Taggart shook my hand. And at the time, I didn't know that he was from Morgan, and I also didn't know that he knew my father. I thought, oh my gosh, Miss Olson believed in me enough that she turned it in. And then
Did you know that she had turned it in?
No, I just thought she wanted me to write this for extra credit. But I wrote it in my sloppy handwriting. And when I got the award and it came back and I looked at it, and those principal and superintendent left, I looked at it and it was typed and it was edited and it was typed by her. And I said, why did you do this in front of the whole class? And she said, because I believe in you and you're a great, great storyteller and a great writer. And I sat there, and after that class I went home, and that was first period, and I skipped all the rest, and I just bawled because she believed so much in me. At that time, I talked to her a lot after class and different things, and I'd bring her gifts, and she was just different but lovely. And she said, I think that you need to be a reporter. You need to go into, newspaper business. And I said, yeah, right. And I always kept that in the back of my mind. And then, 4 years later, 5 years later, 6 years later, I don't know, all these times I'd go up to Morgan and I'd see my dad or my grandma, and I'd buy the local newspaper up there. And I thought, man, this newspaper's not very good. 2 weeks before we were born, we went in, we had just moved to Morgan, and we went into the owners of the newspaper at the time. And we asked them if they needed some help, and we would help them for free. That I would cover sports, and my wife at the time would cover stories. And they pretty much told us to get the heck out of the building. And so I looked at my wife and I said, I have like $9.60 in my pocket. It's not enough to start a newspaper. And then my ADHD brain got going, and I said, how much would we need for us to start a newspaper? And she said, if you get enough advertising and enough rent money for 3 months, then you can start it. I came in the house at 5:30, and I had rented our first place where we were, and I had enough advertisers for 6 months already paid in advance before they ever saw my newspaper. Because once again, I gave them an option for something better. And our paper was not good at the beginning because I didn't know how to spell. There wasn't spell check. There wasn't everything else. And there was a lot of spelling errors. But what I decided is that I was going to make that newspaper a positive newspaper. When I owned it for 9 years, and then I sold it. I came back after the next owners bought it because they didn't know how to run it, and they paid me to be the editor for 2 years. So when I didn't own it, they had changed some things, but I never charged for an obituary. I never charged for a wedding. I never charged for any stuff like that. And every column I wrote, which was called Doug's Den, I wrote a positive story. I did that for 9 years, and then probably a year of the 2 that I was back, and won many, many awards for it. My editor's columns won many, many awards, but I tried to make everything positive. If I had to write a bad story about somebody, it was because it was a police event, somebody shooting somebody or a major wreck on the road or whatever. But all of my stories in that newspaper were positive. And a year and a month after we started that newspaper, I bought the other newspaper out. And so we combined the newspapers and turned it into one. And so I took my staff to the new newspaper, and I had the owners of the other newspaper let their staff go because I didn't want to be the bad guy when it wasn't me that was letting them go. And so there was a little drama over that in a small town, but we went on. So 9 years, I had that paper, and then 2 years after, newspaper business was amazing. And if I wouldn't have written that essay, I wouldn't have been a newspaper person. I wouldn't have wrote the book I wrote. And my second book is a third of the way done. Somebody with dyslexia. And I also have another form of dyslexia that they found out when I was just a couple of years ago is not only do I see the letters wrong, but I can write the words perfectly. And if I have to read in front of someone, and people can see it on this podcast sometimes, is I see the words differently. Although I wrote them, I can't read them the same way as what they say. And so I've found out a lot of things in my life that are different than other people. And so I always say that I'm part alien. But anyway, that's a good newspaper story. So
Some of my favorite memories from when I was little, some of my earliest memories even, were at the office with you, and I loved every second of it.
Yeah.
And
from the time you were born, I took you with me to work until you went to kindergarten. And then after kindergarten, you would come over and spend time with me. Yeah. Her favorite job was to press black and white or color when somebody needed copies.
I loved it. It really was so much fun though. And like looking back, so much of that is just because of you, because it's not like it really was a fun environment for a kid to be in. Like nothing against it. It just, it was an office, and I had the time of my life. We had so much fun there.
And you're the kind of person like me that wants to help others. And you've always been that way. And Riley was that way. I think we choose in life what we want to do. We influence people because of the things we say or the things we do. And like when you get hate messages on, when you get bigger as a podcaster or on Facebook or, as an author, I'm sure in Goodreads, I'll get, mostly great. And then I'll get one, you talk too much about religion. I'm only giving you one, star or whatever. You got to live through those, there's one of my favorite podcasters. The wife is a little bit heavier and they have millions of followers, but most of their comments are, your wife's fat, she needs to lose weight or something like that. And that's just ridiculous. And too much hate in the world. We need more love.
I think the world really could benefit from the saying, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Like we're taught that as a kid. And I just think it gets more and more true into adulthood. I get yelled at work all the time over things that are out of my control, and you just, what do you do?
When I was still LDS or Mormon, I decided I wanted a tattoo, and my wife bought me a tattoo, and it was Mickey Mouse and Walt Disney in front of the castle, and it's on my leg, and it's really big. And I got to work a couple of days later, and one of my coworkers saw it, and he said, that you can't go to the highest kingdom of heaven because you have that tattoo. And I just looked at him and I said, and he'll know who this is. I think if God is worried about that tattoo on me, he's going to worry about a lot more things about me than that dang tattoo.
That's not going to be what.
Yeah. And since then I've got other tattoos, but one of my tattoos, I'm just going to show you because it's part of this episode, is Lady Gaga came up with this tattoo right here. Can you guys see this? Okay. This tattoo is sexual abuse survivor tattoo. And I got it because I'm a sexual abuse survivor, and I'm not afraid to talk to people about it because it may save somebody's life. And I was at the Jody Messina concert in Layton, and this girl came up to me, and I just came from backstage, and the picture behind Carly is Jody Messina's album, and it says Riley, Heaven Needed a Hero, and that was one of her songs, and it says love. and then her name. And the girl was talking to me about it, and she gave me this big hug. And then she sat down, and then after, she gave me another hug, and she said, I saw your tattoo. And she said, you're going to save so many lives.
And I think too, with what you all have done, sharing Riley's story, it's so important just to let people know that it is okay to talk about it.
Right.
It truly does help and save lives, talking about it and knowing you're not the only one or not alone, or other people have experienced the same things. And I think when we don't talk about it and try and stuff it down, it just makes life harder.
Yeah. And someday it's going to explode, and it could
Yeah.
be in tempers or personalities or death. And as a family, and this is my first wife and all the kids and me and my wife, all sat down the night after he died in this house, McKenna's house, and we had a meeting, and we decided that we were not going to hide the fact that Riley committed suicide, and that we were going to try to help people. And then a few months later, me and McKenna got talking, and we decided that we would start this podcast to help other people. We're never going to get rich from this podcast because it's not something that, hundreds of thousands of people watch. It is something that we are doing for the love of Riley and the memory of Riley, and to help people stay alive. We had a guest on. Riley helped keep her alive. She was very, very depressed when Riley died, and she knew him, and she has Riley's picture on her fridge, and she always takes Riley with him on her walks and talks to him and different things. And we know that we've saved a life. We know that there's others that have contacted us and said, because of this podcast, we're staying. We know what it's done to your family.
Just to touch on that too, I say it all the time. I will talk about it all day, every day. Some people aren't comfortable about it, and that's okay. I would never force anyone to talk about it if they don't want to. And I don't do it for sympathy or, hey, here's what happened to me or anything like that. Just bringing light to it and being able to talk about it. And it is such a taboo subject of.
I have, after Riley died, I've had 3 or 4 people at work come up and give me a hug and say, I lost a child 12 years ago to suicide, or I lost a child 10 years to suicide, or my brother committed suicide, my dad committed suicide. We just filmed a video today that this young lady that you guys are going to love, her dad committed suicide at 10, her brother committed suicide, and she went from dropping out of high school to getting her doctorate degree now. So lives can change for the better. And she also, when she was in high school, thought about ending her life. She helps people stay alive now. She helps people that struggle in school get their educations and get their vocational skills and stuff like that. So the people that we have on the show are really strong people that are willing to tell their stories.
I was just going to say, Carly is an excellent example of someone sharing something that really will help others. And go listen to Carly's episode. You
And
won't
because
regret it.
it's on postpartum depression, and because of that, I got in contact with someone else who's going to be on our show through Carly. So
No way.
it just keeps
Oh,
going.
That's so cool. Postpartum is one of those things where I feel like it's really not talked about a lot either, but so many struggle with it. I mean, after doing that episode with you guys, I got so many messages of women telling me like, you're so brave for sharing that. Thank you. Because I dealt with the same thing, and I was shocked at the amount of responses.
And as it picks up and we get bigger and bigger, there's going to be more and more of those. So
yeah.
That's something that just makes me think, like, why is it not a bigger deal? Why are we not talking about this more?
Yeah. And I think, like, Doug, with your past and the abuse, it feels like, and I don't know if I think you kind of felt the same way, but for me, in my postpartum experience, I felt guilty and shameful, and like that I was the problem for going through what I went through, that if I were a little bit different, maybe I wouldn't have experienced that, but it can happen to anyone.
I agree.
Okay, let's go back a little bit. And do you want to talk about college? You mentioned a little bit about it.
Yeah. So at the time, I knew that I was dyslexic, and I still could turn papers in and stuff like that. But I know, like in my communications class or my English class, that I was getting a lot of red marks and everything else. And I was at Stevens Henniker College, and the classes were very small. I think I got couple C's and a B or something like that. And then I wanted to be an accountant because I did very well in accounting in high school. And then when I went to my first class in accounting in college, I said, there's no way in hell that I'm going to be an accountant. And so I talked to my parents, and I was still living at home at the time. And they said, why don't you try a community college and get your associates, and then you can work up, whatever college you want, get your bachelor's. And I said, okay. So we lived in Roy, and Salt Lake Community College was 40 miles away or 35 miles away. So every morning I would get in my car and I would drive to Salt Lake Community College, and I would get there and I would attempt to go into class, and I'd eat breakfast, and then I would miss class. So I'd sit and watch TV, and then I would miss my second class because I was afraid that they were going to ask me to speak in front of everyone. And so then I'd go to my car and take a nap, and then I would try to go to my third class, and then I'd go and they would want us all to be in a group and read things. And I said, I'm going to go back to my car. And I sat there, and this went on for 9 months. Finally, I just told my parents, I just need to work, and I was working at the time. I was working at Maverick, and then I became a nighttime manager at a Maverick, and then they transferred me to another. And that's when I met your mother. She came in for a job, and she got hired. And that's how you came along and your 4 siblings. College was not for me, but about 5 years ago, I decided to go back to college because I wanted a degree, but math was always the hardest for me, not English. And then now there's so many spell checkers and stuff, that could get me through. And so I would write everything and put it through spell check. And then I did really well 4 classes away from getting my associates, but they're all math. If I could just bump the math out, everything would be fine. But I always wanted a degree, but I may not get it, and that's okay because I've succeeded in so many other things. You have to pick and choose what you're going to do, because in life, from the time I was abused until the time I talked to a counselor in high school, I wanted to be either a school counselor, a master's in psychology, or, be a licensed clinical social worker. A character in my second book is a licensed clinical social worker, not because I am one, but because I've been to so many of them that I can pretty much tell you why most of them are clinical social workers. But that's what I always wanted to be, but math always stopped me from it.
I do have one more question about kind of school and everything.
Yeah.
How old were you when you were diagnosed with ADHD?
This is interesting. So I think I was 24. So maybe I was 25 or 26. And I went to the doctor because Nick was diagnosed with ADD, and Nick was 100 miles an hour all the time. And he was diagnosed. And when I was there at the visit, the doctor said, this is pretty hereditary. Maybe you should be checked. I went there and I met with a psychologist, and he talked to me for 30 minutes or so. And he said, you have the worst ADHD they called it ADD at the time, ADD I've ever seen. He said, you really need to go on some medication. And I said, oh, okay. My life pretty much changed that day because I got out to my car and I took that one pill. And within 20 minutes, my brain was working so much different, and it helped change my life. And I took that and I'm like, whoa, this is how normal people feel. And I was also on an antidepressant from the time I was 20. 41 years I've been on antidepressants, but the ADD medicine is the one that opened up my brain and I saw things differently. Without it, people always would say, you haven't taken your medicine. When I'm on it, I get a million things done and I can concentrate and I stay on one topic. Medicine's been good to me, but not only am I on those medicines, but I'm on an anxiety medicine. Most of it came from my childhood. I will always be on anxiety med. I will always be on antidepressant because my brain chemicals are different than some people. I shared that with some of my children, but the big thing is now I have a heart problem. So they've had to change some of my medicine up. And also because when I had my last shoulder surgery, I had to start taking blood thinners more and all the time, every day, twice a day, because I'll die without it. And then they had to change some medicine up again. And so it gets a little tough having to take so much medicine. I'm where I am because I take that medicine. And a lot of people that are depressed will not take medicine. A lot of people that have anxiety won't take medicine. And we lose a lot of them because of it. If you had cancer, you would take it. If you had diabetes, you would take it. Take the medicine and live.
Lexapro changed my life.
Yeah. Lexapro changed a lot of people's life.
I'm serious.
I've never taken Lexapro, but Medicine changes my life.
Anxiety meds,
Yeah.
I am a different person.
Yeah.
Like,
And I don't know what this is, but I mean, I have some family and other people that I know that are almost like against medication. Is there anything you would say to those people if you could about the positive? I don't know why they feel that way. I don't know why they think there's such a negative.
Yeah, in one of our recent podcasts, I talked about it. I said our guest this week lost 165 pounds, came out as gay in her 40s, left her church. Amazing, amazing person. She did our family photos and everything. And we were talking about her being on medication and that some people didn't think it was right. And I said, it was the same thing with me. I was talking to somebody at work and they said, you should never, ever, ever take any medication. Maybe for a headache or something, but nothing other than that. And I looked at that person and I still won't say who it is. If you had cancer, would you have treatment? And they said, well, of course I would. And I said, if you had diabetes, would you have treatment? And they said, of course I would. And I said, I have a chemical imbalance in my brain. I need to take medication. There's no difference between those. And she, after about 2 or 3 minutes, came over and gave me a hug. And she said, I'm going to look at things differently. Another coworker that no longer works there that had the same comment about my tattoo said it was because of his religion, because his religion thinks that you shouldn't take medicine.
Okay, I wondered if, well, I've always just kind of wondered, like, why are there some people that are so against it?
Yeah.
But that would make sense.
Yeah, some religions don't want you to take any medicine. And
another thing, I'm not a doctor and
we neither are.
not giving medical advice, but a lot of people think that once you start it, you have to take it for the rest of your life.
Right.
Some people will take it for the rest of their life, but it doesn't always have to be that way. I've changed mine through the years, and
I'm on my 6th antidepressant, and the 6th one is the best one, and because it also helps with anxiety. But I've been on some great ones, but for one reason or another, I had to get off them. There's different reasons. Or I started taking a different med that doesn't work with it or whatever, or someone quit working after a while, and the doctor says, okay, let's try this. But I had an actual DNA test to tell me what medicines would work best for me. And so, a sequencing test, and it works pretty amazing. So
while we're talking a little bit more about the medical side of things, something that I know comes up a lot, it bugs you, maybe self-conscious about, is your head shaking.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So this is probably one of the biggest things in my life that I wish I could change, but I can't. We've had a few comments that maybe you should be the producer of the podcast and have your daughter do the podcast, because when people see your head shaking, they probably don't want to watch it and they'll turn it off. And I talked to you about this even. And I said, maybe we do that. And you said no. And
I said, absolutely not. It's part of you. And
so my grandmother had later on they call it Parkinson's, but she had an essential tremor. 8 years ago, that's what I was diagnosed with. And so I can't help that my head shakes, and it shakes like this, and sometimes you'll see me on video and it's not shaking. And it's probably when I just had Botox, because I get Botox in my neck, or they're trying a different medication, but they have now tried all 4 medications that work. But my dad also had an essential tremor, and later in his life, they called it Parkinson's. I was diagnosed with an essential tremor 8 years ago, and they also thought that I had MS at the time. And they didn't really do anything about it because my brother had I kept having all these weird symptoms. And one of the symptoms was my body went paralyzed from my shoulder down. And I ended up in the hospital for 4 days. And on the 4th day, I'll tell the end of that story after my head story. But 4 years ago, they diagnosed me with dystonia. And dystonia usually is some part of your body that different things like that. And mine just isn't an essential tremor. It is dystonia. And so they sent me to a geneticist who ordered my tests through sequencing, and it came back. I have dystonia 16, which is really rare. It's so rare that they don't know what to do with it. So eventually they will put a little thing in my brain or somewhere in my brain that comes down through my collarbone and looks like a pacemaker, that when my head shakes or my hand shakes, because I'm prominently left-handed and my left hand's starting to shake. And they said within the next couple of years, I'll probably have to start writing with my right hand. And my voice changes, and I don't sound the same as I used to, because dystonia also affects your voice. when we started this podcast and I looked at the first episode and I was editing it, I thought, oh no, some comments from people that I know and people that I love, I think they were trying to be kind when they said, you shouldn't be doing this podcast. I just said, people need to hear it. And if my head shakes and they don't like it, then just listen to the audio.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, come on, people.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect your ability to do anything.
Yeah, it doesn't affect my
doesn't,
brain.
like-
It's just that my head shakes. And, if you ask me a yes question and I'm going like this, I've had people at work say that they're going to get a bobblehead of me because my head shakes. They think they're funny, but it hurts, Or, somebody called me shaky for a long, long time. And finally somebody told me, hey, you probably shouldn't do that. I can't help it. And just like, it's part of my life and it's going to be there the rest of my life. I live with it. And I'm glad you asked that question because maybe people will not be as mean. If I was blind, would they say, well, you shouldn't be on it because you're looking at the wrong camera? So what? I half the time I never look at the right camera, or I might say, too many times.
Next time someone says something, send them my way.
And mine.
There you go.
I will.
Yeah. So, and because of what happened to me, I had really low self-esteem. So me and your mom were married for 20 years and we got divorced and I was very depressed, very, very depressed. And I went into some relationships that I probably shouldn't have. I am the person that, and a lot of people call me a woman because of this when I talk to them about it, but I am the kind of person that if I'm fighting, or arguing with someone and we're going to bed and they want to do something, I hide in my corner and lay in a ball because I don't want to be around someone that I don't feel close to. Or if there's an argument and they want to keep arguing, I walk away. People don't like that. The reason I do that is because I hate conflict. I hate conflict. I have ruined many relationships because of that. And I have been known to have more wives than most people. I can actually say that I still actually love 3 of them. I still am in contact with those women. And we take 50-50 fault in our divorces. But if I knew then what I know now, probably wouldn't have been divorced so many times. But because of counseling and they found out about my PTSD and how I walk away from things and how I always think that people see me differently. I used to have teachers that would buy me clothes, bring me lunch when I was elementary before we met my stepdad. And at the time, I just thought they did that for everyone. But I look back at it and I wished I could go to every one of them and say, you helped change a life. Maybe I thought people were looking at me at the beginning, not because I was abused, but because I was so dang poor. But my mom did the best she could, and she was a great woman.
Here on your questionnaire, temple experience. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I was LDS most of my life until a couple of years ago. And it's funny because a lot of the people that are on this podcast have left the church and I didn't bring them. I only brought one on because she had a great after experience. But it's funny because I'm not anti-LDS. I really am not. What I am is I'm against the LDS church because they don't love LGBT people. And 2 of my stepchildren are LGBTQ. I decided that my family was more important than that church because of that reason and many other reasons. But that's all I will say on that. But I was at the temple with McKenna's mom, and there's a place where you watch a film and you're sitting there and you're supposed to listen to all this stuff. Well, the whole time I was in that temple, in that hour area or something, every swear word that ever came into my life, every swear word was playing in my mind over and over and over and over again. And I'm like, I need to get out of here. I first of all, I hated going to the temple, but I didn't know why this was happening. And I'm thinking, this is the worst day of my life. I don't ever want to come back here. And I was in my early 20s at the time. My wife had known that, I was sexually abused and about who it was, that he ended up committing suicide. We were walking out of the temple and McKenna's mom said, I had a strong, strong feeling that you need to forgive Brad. And I don't think there's anything worse that she could have said at that time. Why, if she had that feeling, why wouldn't I have that feeling, and anything? So I went to my counselor and talked about it. Well, about a year later, I was still in counseling, still going to the temple once a month because that's what we were supposed to do. My stepmom called me and she said, hey, you're the only member of our family that can do Brad's temple work. And what temple work is that after someone dies, Mormons believe that if you go get baptized for them, if they were married, get them sealed and stuff, or if they weren't, you can seal them to their family. And then they can go to the highest kingdom of heaven, you know. And she asked me to do his temple work. Well, I had never told her that he abused me because I wanted to save her from that. And I always said that I would write a book about it after she was dead. And she died a couple of years ago. And I always thought, well, I'm going to write a book about it. And then I start writing it, and then I don't, then I don't. And that was the hardest thing that was ever said. And I just said to her on the phone, I said, give me a couple of weeks and I'll get back to you. And then I got the phone and bawled myself to sleep, because that's the last thing in the world that I wanted to do, is not only to forgive him, which I have since, but not only to forgive him, but to go there and seal him to his family so he could be with them forever. After 3 weeks, I called her on the phone and I said, Donna, I love you forever. I decided that I will do Brad's temple work. And I thought that was the thing to do because I wanted to help her. And she said, it is so crazy, but 2 days ago, somebody in our ward did it. And so I never had to do it. And so it was such a relief to me that I didn't, because I think I would have been a complete wreck that whole time. Yeah, so that was my temple experience. And then soon after that, I quit going to the temple. But I struggled with my religion for a long time. But I always knew that I explained how I knew that one of my children were gay because I kept dreaming about it for three nights in a row. When I went to all 5 of my children, none of them were. And then a couple of years later, I married my wife. A couple of months later, one of her child walked in and said, can I talk to you? And I said, yeah, and said, I'm gay. And then I just started bawling. And I said, I knew that one of my children were gay. I knew it. I just didn't know it was going to be one of my children later on in life. That was a big turning stone to me. And I learned the gay community pretty well. And I, on a committee at work for LGBTQ people, I go to pride festivals with my children, and I wore a shirt one year that said, my children before my church, or something like that. And 2 people from work said that they not only loved it, but it probably saved their life, because they didn't think anyone could love them outside the church. And recently I had a friend that attempted suicide. And the reason is because she's afraid to tell her parents because of her religion, and no religion should not love someone because they're gay. And a lot of people will turn this podcast off because of what I'm saying. There's so many religions that believe that gays are not welcome, not just the LDS Church. There's so many others. Everyone should have freedoms, and everyone should have rights, and we should love everyone. Life matters. Life matters more.
Another thing we've kind of talked about throughout this, but not in this way, is men's mental health. I think that it isn't necessarily as seen, and for a lot of men, it's, I'm not going to go to counseling. Or how do you feel about that? Or
I feel that I'm here for a reason. It's time for men to stand up and speak out. One in 3 women and 1 in 4 men had been abused as children, according to statistics. And we need to stop those statistics and change them. And if we don't speak up and speak out, they're not going to change. I have a brother-in-law that lives in Australia, and they have these crazy, crazy shirts. And usually I wear crazy, crazy shirts. Half of the money this company makes, they give to men's mental health issues. Not many men will say that they go to counseling. If they do, they're not going to admit it, or even marriage counseling or anything else. More and more are starting to go. And it's okay for us to talk about it. It's okay for us to write about it. In my Christmas book, somebody was abused. You know why? Because the books I write are about life, about things that really happen. My book is a very, very happy book, but that part of that book was not. There's also one of my main characters who was physically abused in that book. And they're like, the Christmas book, and you have that? It's a very, very happy book. There are some scenes that aren't. And you've read the book, you know.
yeah, it's amazing. We'll do another episode about that too.
Yeah,
but
you're my daughter, so you have to say it's amazing.
No, it really is. It really is.
But men's health is so, so important. I've heard guys say, I would never go to counseling, or I have never cried in my life. Geez, I cry myself to sleep all the time. And since Riley died, they thought, well, maybe we need to up your medicine or something like that. And it's no, I have feelings and I'm going to let them out. I've always been good with my feelings of being able to let them out, but I've also been one that will walk away. And one more thing on that, if you do go to counseling and you're like, this counselor sucks, go to another counselor, because I think I'm on my 4th counselor, and I hope that she doesn't quit before I die, because she'll be my counselor until the day I die. But I have been to some that, woo-wee.
And do you think, I don't know, maybe this is not the correct term, but do you think that one of the reasons a lot of men won't go to counseling, won't therapy, all of those things is like, is this the right term? Toxic masculinity? Is that the right term?
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
great term.
But
Yeah.
I just wonder why that is.
Yeah.
Like, I think
Because
it's breaking
probably when they were
down,
growing
but
up,
yeah.
they would fall and start crying, and their dad would say, you're a boy, you're not supposed to
Be
cry.
tough.
Be tough, wipe those tears from your eyes, or, stuff like that. And that's how we grew up. And if a girl fell down, they run over and you kiss their wound and you say, I'm sorry, sweetie, that's the way it is. But boys were different, and boys still have feelings and still need a place to talk it out. Girls can talk on a phone for 4 hours. I guarantee you that I have never talked to one person in my life, and McKenna can guarantee this, because, hello, you want this? Okay, I'll pick it up at the store. Bye. But women can talk to their friends for hours and hours and hours and hours, and, go get their nails done from Carly and talk and talk.
When I called you today for a code that was sent to the email and I wasn't logged into it, and you said, okay, and hung up. And I was like, are you not going to give me the code? But it was really funny because I was like, oh, I guess
because I thought I
text
gave it to you
me.
anyway. But yeah, so men just don't talk on the phone very much, and they don't talk. If girls go out for a girls' night, I've been in restaurants and there's 6 girls sitting there and they're just talking, and the guys, oh, let's talk about the baseball game or the basketball game or the football game. I got to be so masculine and everything else. Man, I want to talk about books. I want to talk about movies. I want to talk about reality shows. Love is Blind, man, this one sucked this season.
I turned it off after the first episode. I don't know, I just couldn't get into it this time.
Yeah, Married at First Sight. I'm like, these couples gonna make it, they're gonna make it, and then they're all gone. This a couple make it once in a while. The ones that I always hope for is Farmer Wants a Wife. Watch the Australian one, and like last year they had 5 out of 5 end up finding their spouses, or their mates. And in the United States, it's like 0 out of 5, 0 out of 5, 1 out of 5. It's like, anyway. So yeah, I love reality TV, but it's
one thing that helps me a lot is music, and I know you've talked about this too. Do you
wow.
want to get in?
Music has pretty much saved me so many times. And if I'm depressed, I listen to Amy Grant, Kelly Clarkson, or someone that most of you have never heard of, and you need to write her name down, Dawn, Dawn, Boyer, Beyer. And she is from Montana. And she has got the most country folk voice in the world. And I would love someday to get her on this show. She's had many, many chapters of her life, and she can put me to sleep in 2 minutes, or she can, when I'm writing, I've written 8 chapters in my new book, and I think her music was on during 7 of those chapters. I volunteer at my local music gallery place where we have concerts, and this is me and my wife's 10th year of volunteering. I do every show. And so I think I've, done hundreds and hundreds of shows as a volunteer security guard. And I love it because I get to talk to everyone there, because that's what I love to do. And a couple of people saw my tattoo that I showed here and gave me hugs and said, this is so important. And I can't believe, I think you're the only man that I've ever seen with that tattoo. Well, let's speak out. Let's speak out for men's health. Let's speak out for keeping people alive. Yeah, music is just so important to me. And I can do almost anything. It was like 5 years ago, my mother-in-law was listening to Christian music, and I'm like, there's no way. All they do is talk about God and everything else. And now, today, I took a nap before this, and when I fell asleep, I was listening to my wife's Sunday playlist, and all it is Christian music, and I love it. There's so many great singers and so many great messages. I try to keep negative out of my life. I don't watch horror movies. I don't watch most of my movies I watch is comedies or romantic stuff, because I think there's not enough time to watch to get into that other stuff. I don't know. It's just my brain wants to be happy.
It's like I don't know if you've ever heard the term deer trails about there's a therapist that has a podcast. I don't remember his name, but he's up in Logan and I listen to it sometimes. And he talks a lot about these deer trails, and the more you think about and the more you do, good or bad, you're going to dig a deeper trail. And I think, yeah, if you have more positive in your life, it's going to lead you to more positivity and happiness. Yeah. Just like if you have a lot of negative or dark or, other things that could lead you down to a darker life.
Right now, we are in the foundation of this podcast, and we are building the foundation. And it takes a long time to build that foundation. And as that foundation dries, people catch on, and men find out that, man, I really need to see a therapist, or my marriage has fallen apart because what happened to me when I was a child, or whatever it is, not just men, but women. We will get a bigger audience, and that foundation will start growing into a big building. But it takes a long time to build the foundation. And we're okay with that, because we didn't start this podcast to get rich. We started this podcast because we wanted to help people stay alive. Hey, this is Doug from This Is My Chapter, and I just want to thank a anonymous person who had this made for us when they saw one of our people that were on our episode crying one day, and she thought that this would be cool that we had our logo. We had a picture of my son and McKenna's brother, Riley, in memory of him, and then This Is My Chapter again, and then this that says, "You matter," because you do matter. And I want to thank her personally once again for having this made for us. And as I cried today, I pulled Kleenex out of this. So thank you so much.
What do you do now for work?
Well, I work for the most employed business in Utah, which is Intermountain Health. Intermountain Health is a conglomerate of over 30 hospitals and hundreds of clinics. And what I do is I started out as a courier there when the recession was bad, and I drove from hospital to clinics, picked up blood, urine, different things, picked up American Red Cross blood boxes, and took them to different hospitals. We do a lot of life-saving stuff by transporting things from hospital to hospital, and during COVID, it was crazy. But anyway, after about 9 months of working there, I became a dispatcher, and the dispatchers tell all the drivers where they're driving every day and make sure they stay on task. And anything that comes in stat or anything we have to send to stat drivers. And not only do we do Utah, but we have a hospital in Idaho. We have 3 hospitals in Montana. We have 4 or 5 in Colorado, and we dispatch for all of those. And so we sit in a room, there's 4 or 5 of us at a time, and we take calls one after another, and we have to be very accurate of what's going to what hospital, when it needs to be there. They need hospital beds, they need ventilators, they need anything, it all goes through us. Now, we also are going to Las Vegas, so I forgot about that one. So we go to Las Vegas once a day. We're just getting bigger and bigger, but the stress of that job, if you went from 0 to 100, is about 98. If you look at my life, my stress level has always been very high. And those are the kind of jobs that, starting a newspaper with nothing, you have to have a deadline every single week to get that newspaper out, stuff like that. The stress is just high. Someday, because I'm getting older, I'm going to be a Walmart greeter or something, because I'll get rid of that stress. But as for now,
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so he can retire.
yeah. Subscribe right here. No, I love my job and I hate my job. I hate my job sometimes because I think we don't get enough help, but other times I think this call just saved a life. I remember when I was in the hospital with COVID and they gave me a 10% chance of living. The blood they took from me got sent down to the lab, and that lab got one of our stat drivers to take that lab to our main hospital in Murray, and they decided what they were going to do, because my heart was going too fast and all my other body parts were slowing down, and they had to decide how to fix me. And for their first 3 days, they didn't think I was going to make it, but it was because of the couriers and, of course, the doctors and the nurses and the lab techs and everything else that saved my life. And so every call I get, it might be, hey, come pick up this urine from an old folks home. We do it with a smile and say, we're going to do it. We may hang up and say that person was rude or something, but we do it with a smile because we know we save lives. That's probably why I haven't quit this job, is because I know every day when I go in there, I'm saving lives. So there was the time when I got put in the hospital because my body shut down from my shoulders down, no movement whatsoever. I was actually paralyzed, and I got to Layton Hospital, and they transported me to McCady Hospital, which is a trauma center. And I was there, and on the I think it was the third day, maybe the fourth day, woke up and my body started working again. Well, during those days, they had different doctors come in. There was the hospitalist, and there was the, every kind of doctor. And they were doing every test they could and sending those tests off, and they were sending them to different labs and different locations. And all it was showing that I had very low potassium. But other than that, these doctors were coming in and asking me, at the time I thought were asinine questions like, have you ever tried to commit suicide or anything like that? No, never once. Not even thought about it. And, have you ever done these kind of drugs? I've never done drugs in my life, and just kept asking all these questions. Well, one of the doctors came in and he said, have you ever been so stressed and so depressed in your life that your body, and I said, yeah, like, right now. And he said, I think your body could not handle any more stress in your life, and it shut down. And he said, I'm going with that. And I said, I am so sorry, but I think you're a quack. You are crazy, and he just left. And I've never been rude to anyone that way. This happened 5 or 6 years ago. Well, I'm listening to podcasts like I always do. And this doctor said, there's this condition when people get so stressed in their life that they just can't handle it anymore, that their body shuts down, and sometimes they go in and they're paralyzed. And sometimes it's for a day, or sometimes it's for an hour, or sometimes it's a week or a month. And then I thought, I wish I could find that doctor and tell him that he wasn't a quack and that he had the right diagnosis.
So is that what it was?
Well, that's
what
I've talked to my counselor about it, and she said she had heard of it too, and that most likely that's what it was, because all my blood work came back normal other than potassium. Potassium usually just makes your legs hurt or something, nothing like that. But my potassium wasn't any lower than it ever was. And so, I feel bad that I said that to that doctor. And, it's this, another hospitalist said, you need to be on your blood thinners the rest of your life. If you don't, you're going to die. Cause I got put in the hospital for the second time with blood thinner, or with blood clots in my lungs. And they said, the next time you're probably going to die. So you need to be on these, and you have to take them twice a day the rest of your life. And it happened because of a shoulder surgery that I had when I got hurt at work. So I had 2 shoulder surgeries. But that's one of the things I really feel bad about. And I try to be nice, and I try to love everyone. And sometimes I fail, and I try again.
And that's what matters most.
That's what matters. I mean, I might try to make dinner and it's the worst dinner ever, and we go out to eat, but at least we got food, it's somebody's got it worse. And doing this podcast, I know that people have it way worse than we do. We need to be able to help those people, be their friends, talk to the people that are loners, talk to people that act like they don't have friends, talk to your janitors, know everyone in your company. No, I don't think there's anybody in my building that I've ever seen that I haven't said hi to, or how are you, or what department do you work in, and they know me as the crazy shirt guy because I always wear crazy shirts, but they also know me as the guy that's friendly. People come to my window at work a lot because I'm their friend, or I'll talk to them or ask how their kid is or whatever. That's so important in life. Even if we're sad in the inside, we can be happy on the outside. And I'm more happy now on the inside than I've been in many, many years. But it's also hard on some of these podcasts we do, because I leave and I think, oh, this poor person, but you're a perfect example, Carly, that people can make it. And you're here smiling, and you're here being our, co-host today.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're so happy, and we'll do it more. But yeah.
To say thank you again to Carly. We really appreciate being here. And I appreciate you telling your story, and
Thank you so much.
I'm just so proud of you.
Thank you, and I love you forever.
Love you.
Amen.
Amen.